here we are, a record-making $55 billion deal, and EA, the maker of games like The Sims, Madden, and Apex Legends, is set to go private. This sale obviously is mirrored with controversy, so here's what you need to know about who bought Electronic Arts, who actually is involved in this deal, and what could happen. Now, this video is only going to scratch the surface, obviously, so stay tuned for a possible multi-part series, and also trust me, this is much bigger than just The Sims. Buyers of this deal are Affinity Partners, private investment fund, and also Silver Lake, and we will be going over the juicy details of each of these. But first, I want to clarify a little bit about this deal. So the deal was valued at $55 billion, which is a big deal also in terms of the debt these investors are taking on. So note, technically speaking, the deal hasn't been fully finalized. It does need to be approved from national security regulators on the Committee on Foreign Investments. That said, it is extremely likely it is going to be approved. The investors also do include a firm managed by Jared Kushner, which of course is President Donald Trump's son-in-law. Now, not only does Trump's son-in-law want to do the deal, but the president could also be inclined to look favorably on any Saudi investment. And please also note, CEO Andrew Wilson, who led the company since 2013, will retain leadership. In this deal, as long as it goes through, unfortunately, would take place in the fiscal year 2027. The fiscal year 2027 takes place from October 2026 to September 30th. First buyer we want to talk about is Affinity Partners. Out of all the buyers, I found out the least about Affinity Partners because honestly, their website tells you absolutely nothing. You even have to log in to get more information. However, Affinity Partners is an American investment firm founded in Florida, and honestly, it was only started in 2021, so it's fairly new. It was started by Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. Within its first year, it had secured over $3 billion, and 2/3 of that funding comes from the Saudi Arabia government's public investment fund. The purported claim is that this partnership wants to support both Israeli and American companies. They also have broader international aims in India as well as parts of Asia and the Middle East. Now, in the past, Jared Kushner has been involved with trade negotiations with US, Mexico, Canada, and even deals between Israel, the United Emirates, Sudan, and Morocco. So as you can see here, there's a lot of push for soft power, which I will cover in another video. But now we're going to move on to the private investment fund. And of course, this has gotten the most scrutiny of the buyers. The private investment fund actually has existed since the late 1970s. Of course, the private investment fund is headed under Saudi Arabia's central government, and lately, in the past 5 or so years, they're really looking to diversify past oil. This has been done by pushing into tons of gaming and tech sectors. They have faced accusations of something called sports washing, which is placing a better image in Western cultures through different acquisitions. They also, of course, have been accused of human rights violations. Now, obviously, they are a key funder, as I said, of Kushner's Affinity Partners. They have invested, and even before this acquisition, they already had a 10% share in EA. They've obviously been eyeing this and also other gaming companies, which takes us to our other investments. Those other companies include Take-Two Interactive, Adobe, PayPal, Microsoft, Apple, Meta, Amazon, MasterCard, Eli Lilly, United Healthcare, Cigna, other healthcare companies. Also, interestingly, JP Morgan and Chase, and JP Morgan and Chase is supposed to help close this deal. So as you can see here, it's all interconnected. They already have their hands in gaming and tech companies, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the future, if this works out, they buy out other gaming companies. And it doesn't end there because Silver Lake is our other investor. Now, Silver Lake is a particularly interesting one because it actually has something to do also with TikTok, which I will get into in just a moment. Silver Lake is based in Menlo Park, California, but of course it has tons of global investments with more than $110 billion in combined assets, and it was founded in 1999. They also have run into some controversies, go figure. First controversy was the sale of Skype to Microsoft in 2011. During the sale, Silver Lake was accused of unfairly depriving Skype employees of an options windfall. And in 2014, the almost $30 million settlement was the accusation that they colluded colluded with rivals to drive down prices of corporate takeovers right before the financial crisis. It is noteworthy that Goldman Sachs and Bain Capital were also fined $121 million together. This was a huge settlement and obviously speaks to some of their controversy. Now, this is where things get really depressing because even though very few people have been talking about Silver Lake, they also worry me too. So, Silver Lake is invested in Airtable, Dell as in Dell Computers, Noom, GoodRx, and tons of other companies, but the one that really struck me was Unity. Unity, of course, is a gaming engine that many developers use, including some indie games too. So as you can see here, even though they don't own these, they are directly involved in all areas too. However, probably the most concerning thing about Silver Lake to date is their possible interactions with TikTok. Silver Lake and the company Oracle may control the algorithm for TikTok users in the United States. Tech giant Oracle will spearhead US oversight of the algorithm and security underlying TikTok's video platform under the terms of a deal. All the final details still need to be nailed down, but they have joint venture partners, which includes Silver Lake Partners. And it could also include two billionaires. The two billionaires involved include Rupert Murdoch and personal computer pioneer Mike Dell. So as you can see here, they are all interconnected. So that is a lot to unpack. I know it's a lot of technicalities, but like I said, I saw so many people talk about just one of the buyers, but in reality, we also need to consider Affinity Partners and Silver Lake and also just how connected everything is. That is, we really are in quite a situation where so much of gaming, tech, and healthcare are controlled by these investment firms and also billionaires, and honestly, there's not tons of regulation against this. Now we go down to the question of should we be worried? I would say obviously we should be, but it is a complex situation. What I see brought up a lot about The Sims is something I would like to cover in a future video because I think it deserves a lot more time and also a lot more thought. And that, of course, is what kind of content changes could we expect in a game like The Sims? But today we're going to start with layoffs and bankruptcy. In fact, private equity firms played a role in 56% of large US corporate bankruptcies during 2024 alone. Large bankruptcies, which are overrepresented, disproportionately affect workers and local economies. As far as layoffs, do we think that The Sims will be shut down? It is always possible The Sims will be shut down. However, there are a lot of theories on what is more likely. And what is more likely is shutting down studios that might be underperforming. One studio is especially worried about the future, which is BioWare. In January, the studio saw a number of staff let go after Dragon Age failed to meet expectations. At the time, a number of employees spoke up about the fear of another round of layoffs. Fast forward today, and that feeling has grown tenfold. Multiple sources have spoken about their feelings over the past 24 hours. Look at the negativity that came after Dragon Age. If we felt we were going to get worse then, imagine what we think now. And I hate to say this, but I think that is a strong possibility. Now, another possibility of resolving the debt is that EA is going to change its structure. EA will split between strategic crown jewels on one hand and assets to be managed on the other, supposedly spinning off smaller divisions. But they also wondered if some of EA's larger studios could even find an outside buyer at this point. I'm not sure who would take on the risk of a huge investment like that after all the struggles. However, servicing $20 billion of debt means cutting costs. So this is really another topic I need to get into another video because another way they could cut costs, of course, is relying more on generative AI. But as we say here, there are a couple possibilities. Yes, Sims could be shut down, it could also be sold, but again, you do have to have a buyer, and honestly, this is where it gets concerning. Who would actually be able to buy a studio like Maxis? Maxis is still going to be expensive, which means you need a company with a lot of capital. And unfortunately, all the major gaming companies are involved with these investors, and the same situation could occur yet again. Yes, in some ways, I would love to see Maxis Studios sold off, but it is not a given that the next buyer would be a great candidate either. However, I do have to add a section here. As much as I am definitely against this deal, there are possibilities of how they could do well enough financially. For example, it is possible the deal could give EA more freedom in future development and distribution. By going private, they will be able to retool operations without worrying about shareholder interest or market scrutiny. As a result, EA could get a little bit more breathing breathing room to do what they do. But at the same time, gamers are generally not enthralled with corporate owners influencing how game makers are making their games. And of course, EA already faced criticism for their live service games and their general monetization practices. These moves would likely cut into EA's quarterly profits, a difficult proposition for executives who face the scrutiny of public markets. As a managing director of a securities company said, they're going to take it private and they're going to do what they've got to do to make this work. So the question is, how are they going to make those changes? What are those changes going to be? And what does it mean for everyone in gaming? Again, I know we need to talk about Sims and also the other implications of content, but I did want to start with just a broad view. I wanted to let you know a little bit more about the deal, when it's set to go through, and who is involved. But of course, stay tuned for more parts and let me know in the comments below if there's something specific you want me to cover. As always, please be kind to each other and I'll see you in the next video.